While dolls, games, and action figures have existed for decades, even centuries, in the 1980s, toys became big business. The industry earned an estimated $12 billion in America in 1986 alone. IP concepts and trends that started in the 60s and 70s were fully developed, manufactured, and marketed to eager moppets transfixed by after-school cartoons or breakfast cereal tie-ins. And the toys themselves were incredible, with many of the most popular lines standing the test of time even decades later. Now the great pop culture debate wants to determine, what is the best 80s toy line? In a world of Transformers, I'm a GoBot. And that's not a good thing. I'm Eric Rezsnyak. Please help me welcome my fellow 80s kids for this debate. With a wardrobe of matching separates, it's GPCD's own Cabbage Patch Kid, Karissa Kloss.
Well, not quite. I may have a lot of tattoos, but there's no signature on my left cheek yet.
Paging Xavier Roberts, this is your moment. Next, she may be spinning in circles, but she's making some sweet-ass designs. No, it's not a spirograph. It's Kate Racculia.
We girls can do anything right, Barbie.
Yes. You sure can. Twirling toward freedom. And finally, he's the master of his own universe, but he would prefer that you not mention the gray on his skull. Please welcome back Zack Derby.
Oh, Eric, listing all the things that make me the least attractive. Thank you.
I have the power to ruin your self-confidence. And up in the producer booth, we have Bob Erlenbach, still trying to figure out what the heck a Popple is supposed to be. If you're curious about how he ended up with this Sweet 16, become a Patreon supporter of the podcast or listen to the 3-minute primer available wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, you can head to the episode on greatpopculturedebate.com to find the listener bracket so you can play along with us at home. And with that out of the way, let's head to KB Toys and tear into these 80s toys. First up, it's a unanimous victory for ultimate number 1 seed Cabbage Patch Kids, which harvested a bumper crop of votes compared to 4-seed Gem and the Holograms, which means this show is over, Synergy. But Karissa, you wanted to sing us a little something about Gem, who I am told by reliable sources is truly outrageous. Karissa, go on.
It's true, and the doll was also outrageous. I had a lot of Barbies, but I only had one Gem. Gem was the coolest. She was Barbie-like, but she was bigger, and she had more articulation. Her wrists were articulated, and she had this very cool pink, like lightning bolt zigzag bangle that you could snap on. It was very awesome. She came with an outfit change, a cassette, a poster, and was everything that you would expect from the show. And you got a single with every doll, plus the poster. They really leaned into like the rock star stuff. And it is kind of surprising that we didn't all grab it. You know, I mean, we did, I guess. I grabbed all of it. We were kids in the 80s, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it was so cool. But that being said, she's up against Cabbage Patch Kids, so they will advance into the next round. Next, 3/4 of the panel wants to put the tiny pedal to the teeny metal as they prefer 3-seed Micro Machines. But Zack thinks them's fighting words because he wants to lead 2-seed G.I. Joe to victory. Karissa, tell us why Micro Machines made a big impression on you. Zack, tell us why you still have a military-industrial complex when it comes to G.I. Joe. Zack, please go first.
Like I said before we started recording, like this entire list, I could be swayed either way. And this was tough because I had Micro Machines and I had G.I. Joe. I just had more G.I. Joe. The Micro Machines was a great collection of cars, and for the most part, I just went, well, that's what it was. G.I. Joe gave me action figures. It gave me vehicles. It gave me play sets. I remember there were ones you could only get certain action figures by mailing in. You had to save up points, cutting out little cardboard boxes from the G.I. Joes and the Cobras that you purchased, and you mailed them in, and they would send you shit back. That was the magic of the 80s. And they continued this toy line like well past the 80s into the 90s, 2000s. I think they stopped in like the late 2017, 2018, something like that. So I'm talking more about the 80s, the small, 3 3/4 G.I. Joes. We all know the other ones originally started much bigger, but that was one of my earliest core toy franchises that I owned was G.I. Joe. So that's more of where my heart lied. Micro Machines, still a lot of fun, but I spent a lot more time with my vast G.I. Joe collection.
Karissa, talk to us about Micro Machines.
Yeah, Micro Machines were small vehicle replicas, slightly larger than N scale, and play sets that went with them. they didn't even come onto the scene until 1987 and later. So it's kind of a late 80s toy. But they're miniatures. They're hyper collectible. For 3 to 4 years, they were the largest selling toy car line, outselling Hot Wheels, Matchbox, and Majorette combined.
Wow.
Combined. Yeah. They have a longevity. They were used in Home Alone at the bottom of the stairs. That's one of Kevin's traps for the burglars, is all the Micro Machines. And they're still happening today. They keep getting reboots. There's monster trucks. They did motorcycles, planes, and helicopters, boats. I remember my brother and I had a boat, like a little one. And they had the iconic commercials with the world's fastest talking man. But my 2 main points here are that my brother had G.I. Joes, but I did not. And we both had Micro Machines. Also, if you're a kid and you want a lot of toys, but you don't have a lot of space, get small toys. You could have way more Micro Machines than Barbies or anything else because they were so small. They came in cute little carrying cases. They had lots of fun accessories. I mean, we love small things. They're cute.
Kate Racculia, where are you on this one?
I am with Micro Machines, kind of for that reason that you mentioned, Karissa, that like they had a broader appeal. And I think part of what's brilliant about it is like toy car. What do you do to make that new and a fad? And like they figured out how to do it. And a huge part of it was the marketing. I thought you were going to talk like this when you were like doing your
only.
And part of my rubric is like how culturally 80s is something. And so many of these, the more tied into like crass consumerism and marketing, they got a higher point. And Micro Machines are amazing toys, but like it was the marketing that drove that, right? Like, and then the actual playability of the thing. So Micro Machines.
Yeah, I'm going to be very honest. The marketability and how it was marketed is a huge part of my rubric here because I do think it's inseparable from a lot of these toys. Like they were sold to us in a way that made like you had to have them. And that's, I think, a successful toy line. So Zach, the really critical thing for me was I didn't have any G.I. Joes. And I grew up in a house of 4 boys, 0 girls. We had no G.I. Joes. We had basically all the other action figure lines, but for whatever reason, not G.I. Joes. And I don't think it's because my parents were like, ooh, anti-war. That's not what
There's the 80s, everything had a gun.
Exactly.
Everything.
But weirdly, and I don't know many other friends of mine that didn't and did have G.I. Joe. So for that reason, I gave it to Micro Machines because everybody had those growing up. Yep. So that is 3 for Micro Machines, meaning it will move on to the next round, but you did a great job talking about Joe, Zach. Next.
I'm fine.
It's another unanimous victory, this time for 1-seed Pound Puppies, which closed up any path forward for 4-seed Polly Pocket. Did anyone want to say anything about Polly Pocket? Because
there's a real trend of making tiny things.
Yeah.
Like, and Polly Pocket was just effing adorable. Like,
yeah, and I had the I'll say male counterpart, Mad Max. So my sister had Polly Pocket later, but Mad Max was, again, a miniature. They had a cartoon about eventually, but he had a little play set that would open up into whatever, and you could move him around. Like I don't think he would really move that much, but you control him through these different environments, and then he'd fold back up into a pocket-sized, little container, much like Micro Machines or Polly Pocket.
That now that you're mentioning it, it sounds vaguely familiar to me.
Mighty Max.
Mighty Max, not Mad Max, right?
Mighty Max.
Yeah.
Did I say Mad Max? I'm an idiot.
You did. I was like,
no,
amazing.
Good.
What?
It's
That's
Mel
okay.
Gibson, but tiny. Next, in a battle of highly gendered 80s toys titans, the panel is evenly split between 3-seed Masters of the Universe, a.k.a. He-Man, and 2-seed My Little Pony. Karissa, brush away any concerns we may have about the ponies prancing forward. I will see if I have the power to defeat the evil forces of Skeletor, and also girls. Karissa, please go first.
I don't understand. Well, I guess I do. There's some gendered stuff here, but My Little Pony proves that everyone's a horse girl at heart. My Little Pony debuted in 1982, and before the 90s were out, there were 150 million ponies sold. The very first line included icons such as Applejack and Glory. Glory was my favorite. They were figurines with brushable manes and tails. They had side flank designs that were all different. There were some unicorn horns. There were some with little wings. There were sea ponies. And also, I loved the flocked ponies. They were the So Soft line. They all had really cute accessories, brushes, saddles, hats for some of them. And my favorite was the pony shoes. Like the little round, like suction-y things that you put, and they were so cute. They had a cartoon that was 65 episodes. It is completely unhinged. So is the movie. It's a little dark. These toys were definitely aimed at girls. They had play sets like the Dream Castle. There was a show stable, and also the nursery with the baby ponies and little bottles and the little cradle. It is so adorable. I know Kate is looking it up right now. You're gonna die. I am. They're hyper collectible, really interactive, but definitely for girls, but also so cute. Everything, it's the same thing, but slightly different, right? A new color, a new little flank design. So it's infinitely replicatable, and it's still happening today. Bronies, all this. Everybody loves a horse.
You keep saying we're all whore, and I was like, yes. And then you said horse girls. I was like, oh, that's not quite where I thought we were going. But yes. Okay. So you said that this is specifically a girl toy. And I don't
marketed toward girls.
It's marketed towards girls, especially in the 80s. Although I do acknowledge in the 2000s, the bronies were a thing, and arguably were even more culturally relevant then than My Little Pony was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Masters of the Universe. If you were a boy growing up in the 1980s, it is highly likely you owned one or many Masters of the Universe figures. It's just what you did. Introduced by Mattel in 1982, they would become one of the dominant toys for boys for at least the first half of the 80s. In its first year, the toy line reportedly saw profits of $38 million, but by 1986, those numbers were exceeding $400 million in 1980s dollars. Simply put, Masters of the Universe was one of the defining toy lines of the decade. You can't deny it. Why was it so popular? First, the concepts are cool. Coming from a Conan the Barbarian starting place and then weaving in advanced technological elements, the world of Eternia is fascinating and exciting. Secondly, the characters themselves were literally iconic. You have your classic dual identity hero in Prince Adam and He-Man, trading the Clark Kent Superman shtick. You had a scary main villain in Skeletor with an incredible visual design that evoked that battle of true good versus evil. And then there were dozens of memorable, if one-note secondary and tertiary characters, almost all of whom got their own action figures. And of course, the cartoon. Filmation's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was the first animated series created specifically to be syndicated on weekdays after school, not on Saturdays. And it was a huge hit with kids, specifically boys. You might say, we're talking about the toys, not the cartoon, but I would counter both parts were equally essential in the other success here. This was a true marketing synergy. And while it has been replicated, Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles come to mind. I don't know if anyone did it better than Masters of the Universe. And that's really saying something because that cartoon itself sucked. So with that being said, Kate, where are you on this one? Is it My Little Pony or is it He-Man and the Masters of the Universe?
I picked ponies because I had ponies, even though I wasn't a horse girl. They're just very cute. But I think you may have swayed me because arguably it's got all like the marketing, the consumerism, the tie-in, first syndicated, like that's a huge thing, right? The toys themselves are amazing. The designs on them are so fun and weird and specific. The characters, the toys are better than the show to market them.
Sure.
Right. And also the movie, Frank Langella, like Skeletor.
Drinking that orange juice.
Just so I'm gonna flip over to Masters of the Universe. That is, I think, the most and the fact that like the bronies, like arguably ponies are more relevant in the last like 15 to 20 years than they were even then. Yeah.
Interesting
argument. So I think that Masters of the Universe is more trapped in the 80s.
Zach, where are you on this one?
I went in with Masters of the Universe, and I 100% see the argument for My Little Pony. But again, I connected more and see more of Masters of the Universe for the 80s, just from my perspective. So I'm staying there.
Chris, I'm going to be really honest with you. I fully expected to lose this, and I thought My Little Pony was going into the next round.
I'm a little surprised it's not because it's so iconic, but I completely get your points. Like, I had ponies, but my friend had Castle Grayskull, right? So,
right. Yep.
With that being said, we are moving Masters of the Universe into round 2. Next, it's another even split, but this time not on gender lines, as Karissa and myself care a lot about the future of fortunes of one-seed Care Bears, but Kate and Zach may force a tie by sticking with 4-seed Star Wars. Kate, why are Kenner's Star Wars figures the toys we are looking for? And no, that's not a rage stroke. I'm using my Care Bear stare to make you see the power of friendship in defense of the Care Bears. But Kate, please go first.
I mean, I think that this says a lot because I fucking love Care Bears. They were my life. They were my everything. I was much more of a stuffed animal girl than any of these in the 80s. Like, and the idea that like your entire personality could be like on your stomach and people would just know what they were getting and you didn't have to communicate it, like, is actually extremely attractive.
much like My Little Ponies.
It's true.
It's true.
We're really into like shortcut symbolism.
Yes, shortcut symbolism and collect them all.
Yes.
So, but the Star Wars toy line, so much about the way we think about toys now is because of this and the way we think about movies and entertainment and media. It was the OG tie-in action figure. It was from a line of over 100 unique toys. A total of more than 300 million units were sold during the original run. Originally, they offered the licensing deal to Mego, and Mego turned it down. And then Kenner took it, which was a subsidiary of General Mills. And this is not the first time on this episode we will talk about toy lines directly connected to major American corporations that have nothing to do with toys.
Yep.
So it died down in 1985, came back in 95 when they re-released the special editions. It has basically never stopped. It is the reason we think about merchandising with movies is these toys. So that's the 80s part of it and the like cultural relevance part. These toys just effing ruled. Like this, the all of the characters in all of the different movies, all of the different creatures, they were incredible action figures. The little Darth Vader with like his little like lightsaber that like was like a little piece of plastic that came out of his arm, and he had like a little plastic cape that I had 2 of because one of them got lost behind the couch. The vehicles and the play sets, the Millennium Falcon, the ATs, the walkers, like I had an Ewok village. Like they were a way for you. They were legitimately fun because you could play the movie and all the other adventures that you could imagine beyond the movies in this incredibly captivating, rich universe in the 80s, which was a very capacious, imaginative space that Disney is colonizing in a way that is much less special now, I will say it. Anyway, these toys, I 100% played more with than anything else in the 80s were these. Yeah.
So, for me, the Care Bears, they did not actually start out as toys. The IP was created by greeting card company American Greetings in 1981 and, like Strawberry Shortcake, was quickly licensed to a variety of products, including the wildly successful Kenner lines. Just realized this is Kenner versus Kenner.
Yep.
These include large, incredibly soft stuffed animals, as well as other smaller, semi-posable plastic mini sculptures, and of course, they were splashed all over everything girl-oriented throughout the decade. Sweatshirts, sheets, trapper keepers, keychains, jewelry, you name it. Of all the plushies on this bracket, and we do have several, I think Care Bears have the most personality. Each of the bears had a different name and signature tummy symbol, aka belly badge. Originally, there were 10. The ostensible leader was the brown Tenderheart with his simple heart motif, but you also had the pink Cheer Bear with his Rainbow Tummy, the green Good Luck Bear with his Shamrock, the blue Grumpy Bear with his Rain Cloud, my personal favorite, and so on. Additional bears would be added with somewhat less success. Was Try Your Best Bear the original participation trophy made toy?
What was the symbol? What was
it?
I'm gonna look it up.
That's what I say to my dates on a Saturday night.
Oh.
And later in the 80s, we got the Care Bear Cousins, which would bring in a variety of animals, but with stronger concepts. I think Care Bears has broader appeal across genders than many of the other toys on this list. It would not be ridiculous for a boy to have, say, a friend bear or a messy bear. But I also don't believe that Care Bears hit some of the commercial highs that some of the others did, including the most obvious competition, Cabbage Patch Kid. Zach, are you with Star Wars or are you with Care Bears?
Gosh, I could go either way. I knew girls that I was growing up with that had Care Bears, and I didn't own much Star Wars, but my friends did, and I was jealous. So I really want to stay with Star Wars because that's where my heart is sitting.
Okay. Karissa, Care Bears or Star Wars?
Yeah, I'm got to stick with the Care Bears here because that's what I had. I think when you were listing off the toys, I think one of my friends had the Ewok Village, and I remember playing with like She-Ra guys in the Ewok Village. But I had the blue Grumpy Bear, and my brother had the green Lucky Bear, and we also had the figurines, and that was sort of, so I'm going with my heart just because I'm not familiar with the Star Wars toys.
So I was originally going with Care Bears, but I think Kate actually swayed me over to Star Wars because we would not have all of the other movie tie-in figures without the success of the Star Wars line. Mm-hmm. And as I was doing my research, Karissa, I was like, listen, I love Care Bears. And I dressed up as a Care Bear. We had Care Bear ornaments that we made for Christmas. But they never had the highs that Star Wars did, or many of the other ones on this. So that's why I'm switching over to Star Wars.
I
so
totally see it.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next, it's another split decision, this time between 2-seed Rainbow Brite and 3-seed Strawberry Shortcake. Kate, color our opinions favorably in defense of Rainbow Brite. Zach, serve up a big, delicious defense of Strawberry Shortcake. Zach, please go first.
So my knowledge of Strawberry Shortcake really just comes more from what my sister had when she was growing up. Rainbow Brite, I know of, and was there a cartoon of her?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, of course. Everything we talked about had a cartoon.
Yep.
But my sister had the Strawberry Shortcake collection. She had a number of them. I don't remember all of them, but I remember seeing the different variety, the different, and it reminded me of my G.I. Joes or My Little Pony, or really any of these where it's like, oh, here's a whole collection. Each one has their own unique identity, persona. I don't remember if they had abilities or what it was, but it's stuck out to me more than Rainbow Brite just because I was more familiar with it. But my knowledge of it kind of ended there of, well, my sister loved them and they were quite popular for quite some time. And it gave us one of the best characters on Robot Chicken, Bitch Pudding.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for dropping Bitch Pudding. I'd completely forgotten about that until this moment. Thank you. Great. Kate, can you talk to us about Rainbow Brite?
I sure can. So Rainbow Brite is a creation of Hallmark Cards. So it started as a cartoon, actually, and then was licensed as a toy line, both in 1984. Rainbow Brite and the Star Stealer was an animated movie that came out in 1995. It was produced by Deke. Sorry, Deke. Of course, there have been multiple reboots, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just going to read verbatim the backstory of Rainbow Brite from Wikipedia because I did not remember it. It's fucking insane. A young girl named Wisp is brought to a gray, desolate land with the mission to bring color to this fictional world by locating the Sphere of Light, all caps. Along the way, she befriends a furry creature called a sprite named Twink, and a magnificent horse named Starlight, and finds a mysterious baby who turns out to be the key to her mission. With the help of her new friends, Wisp locates the legendary Color Belt and rescues the 7 color kids who have been trapped by the King of Shadows. Using the Color Belt, Wisp and the Sphere of Light defeat the King of Shadows, liberate the sprites, and bring color and beauty to the land, henceforth called Rainbow Land. Wisp is renamed Rainbow Brite in honor of her new role as leader of the color kids, who are together in charge of all the colors in the universe. Do kids' things have this kind of mythos today, or is the mythos Star Wars? I think the mythos is just like Star Wars now, right? Because like this is like someone thought about this very hard. Regardless the toys, regardless of the background, the toys, the aesthetics are terrific. They're super colorful because they're very rainbow, color forward. A little space age. It's almost like if Lisa Frank had designed Aliens is kind of what I think.
Yes,
totally into that.
I had a Starlight, the horse. It was amazing. And her sidekick is named Twink. Next.
Were the Rainbow Brite toys plushies or were they more plastic?
They were like plush dolls, right?
Yeah.
It was like the glowworm. They were like plush with a molded head.
Yes.
Right.
And yarn hair.
Yes. And a high pony. And a bang.
And iridescent fabric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which you could take off, and she wasn't naked underneath. She had like a blue torso, like a leotard.
Because she was raised right. Karissa, where are you on this one?
Yeah, I'm with Rainbow Brite, and I'm still salty about I lost my Twink. I lost my Sprite someplace in the back of my closet, and I could never find it again, and I was so sad because it was so cute.
God. I hate to see it.
Relatable content, right?
Relatable content. This is a tough one for me, Zach. So I didn't have sisters, and I never played with either of these. As a burgeoning,
What if I
Yes.
if I told you that Strawberry Shortcake also had an awesome game for the Atari 2600, so you knew it was baller on the Atari?
I believe it. Strawberry Shortcake also smelled like all of the
Yes.
characters had.
That's what they had. They had smells. They weren't abilities. They were just the blue one smelled like blueberry.
Yes. And children, you have to understand, smelling was very big in the 80s. We had Scratch and Sniff Snickers. We had all of it.
We didn't have anything else. We had to use our olfactory senses.
Well, even if I stick with Strawberry Shortcake, it doesn't matter because Rainbow Brite's a 2-seed. And so it will advance even on the ties.
Gotcha.
So we will go ahead and move Rainbow Brite into the next round. Finally, in round 1, we have not one but 2 unanimous decisions as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a 1-seed, popped the bubble of 4-seed Popples, and 2-seed Transformers rolled out and rolled over 3-seed Thundercats. But Kate, you remain a ball of emotions regarding Popples, right?
I mean, I love Popples. Like I said, I'm a stuffy person. They're basically same designer as Strawberry Shortcake and Care Bears for American Greetings, manufactured by Mattel. The idea supposedly came to her when she was folding socks. It's a stuffed animal that you fold into itself. It becomes a ball. Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Great. And listen, I'm a Thundercat ho, but it's not going to win against the Transformers. It's not. So that's the end of round 1, folks. We're going to take a quick break to spay and neuter these pound puppies. We'll be right back after these messages.
$5. In this economy, that won't buy you much. But at the Great Pop Culture Debate, $5 goes a long way toward creating the quality programming you're currently enjoying. $5 won't buy you a burrito, a frappuccino, or a movie ticket, but it can definitely buy you a zinger, a laugh, and a hit of nostalgia. Please consider heading to patreon.com/Great Pop Culture Debate and joining us today.
And we are back for round 2 of our best 80s toy line debate. Before we get into the Elite 8, I want our panelists to share their social media accounts, what else they're working on, and also please share a cherished 80s toy memory with me. Karissa, I'm going to have you go first.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Karissa Kloss. You can also converse with me if you become a Patreon and join our Discord, where I'm very active. I am working on continuing to sew a wardrobe of matching separates, which maybe the Cabbage Patch Dolls laid a core memory for me, and a cherished 80s toy memory. Picture this. It is November 1983. I am a toddler. My mother is 8.5 months pregnant with my brother. Did she spend the day after Thanksgiving racing through a department store to the toy department in the back so she could secure a Cabbage Patch doll for her precious little daughter's 3rd Christmas? She sure did. Would I have known either way if I didn't get it? No, but it happened. And the idea of my ginormously pregnant mother running to get her hands on this, limited doll that was all the rage suddenly, is something that I think fondly of.
I just want to say, make department store fights great again. Zach, why don't you tell us about your socials, what else you're working on, and a cherished 80s toy memory?
All right, so you can follow me still on Twitter because that's what it still is on my phone. I never updated. Suck it. And I'm on there at Zach Deuce because the first one was taken by my real name, and that guy doesn't even use Twitter, I guess. What we're working on at the We Can Make This Work, probably podcast network. We've been going through the Ghibli seasons, however you say it. I just submitted my entry for Spirited Away. And so far, this has been a fun trek down a bunch of movies that I had never seen. I grew up on the Bluth cartoons and the Disney cartoons. I only knew of Spirited Away because Disney handled the American promotion of it, and that was it. All the other films, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery, just all of them so far I've never seen, and they're all great. So we're going through that. We still have our random disassembled episodes, which we will be tackling, I think, Godzilla -1 next. And for a favorite 80s toy memory, I do remember one Christmas waking up and going to the bathroom, and my grandparent and my parents were in the kitchen doing something. And I was just like, I'm old enough to kind of know how the magic works here or there. But I ended up going to bed. And then the next morning I woke up to what every parent wants to do is set up a display. So when the kid comes down, it's not just packages. There is a full-on display, and it was the Ghostbuster Firehouse with the Ecto-1, with the members of the team, the ghosts that came with them. It was like all set up and displayed, and some were on like they took over the Christmas packaging area where Santa had delivered the packages, but this was definitely from my parents, and they wanted me to know it because, well, they spent all the goddamn money, so they were going to get the thank you to it. But that was awesome, just coming down and being like, holy shit, I am in Ghostbusters right now. This is great.
That's awesome. And yeah, give those parents some credit. Santa hogs all the credit. It's not fair. Kate, your socials, what are you working on? And an 80s cherished toy memory.
So my social, I'm on Instagram. I don't really post, but I'm there. You can look at my old cat pictures and Gomez Rack. I'm not really working on anything other than this podcast right now, which feels like lovely to have this podcast. A cherished memory. I mean, I remember the Christmas that I got the big Fievel, the big stuffed Fievel. And that was, again, stuffed animal. I always liked animals, even though I voted against My Little Ponies. I've always preferred animals to humans. And loved stuffed animals. And the Fievel was just like, I'm an only child that was like, oh, I have a sibling now.
Oh, adorable. Well, you can find me at Eric Rezsnyak on Instagram, or just message at Great Pop Culture Debate on Insta or TikTok, or at GPCD on Mastodon. But what you really need to do right now is sign up for our weekly newsletter, new every Monday at noon, that tells you about everything new in pop culture that week. Sign up by finding the link on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com or via our link tree on any of our social media accounts. It's time for a Patreon shout out. This one to Chad Rezsnyak, who is one of our top tier Patreon supporters, who has been with us since we started the show in 2020. Thank you, Chad. You ended up getting most of my old 80s toys anyway, so this is only fitting. You can check out Chad's sponsored episodes, including Best Nintendo Villain and Best Song of 1985 at greatpopculturedebate.com. If you would like to get a shout out on a future episode, become a Patreon supporter by finding the link on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com. I'll keep my memory brief. 10 years old, I get Metroplex, the giant city transformer, for my birthday. I've wanted it forever. And my older brother, broke him in half, snapped him in half. And Brian, I'm still not over it, if you're listening to this. So let's move on to round two, because I don't like the way those bears are staring at us. First up, I think it may be another unanimous victory for one-seed Cabbage Patch Kids, which meant that 3-seed Micro Machines were sent to the scrapyard. But we haven't really talked about Cabbage Patch Kids yet. So Kate, please peel back the layers of why we should care about Cabbage Patch Kids.
I'll just preface this by saying and I'll show my hand, I originally had Star Wars going all the way, but as I was doing some research, I was like, oh shit, it's got to be Cabbage Patch Kids. They were a fad that changed the way we thought humans could behave. And I actually, so there's a documentary called $1 Billion Babies, and one of the pull quotes from it is, "This is a story about the worst parts of capitalism."
It truly is.
It truly is. So they were, and I didn't know there's a scandal about the origin of Cabbage Patch Kids. So there's a woman, hold on, I have her name. Her name is Martha Nelson Thomas. She was a crafter in Kentucky, I think. And she made these like soft sculpture dolls with Cabbage Patch are just ugly as hell. Like, can we just say that?
How dare you?
Sorry, they're just
Hagsville.
ugly. But they're in their ugliness, they become transcendent, and like people want to take care of them. Anyway, so Martha Nelson Thomas made these soft sculpture babies, and Xavier Roberts met her at a craft fair and was like, "Hey, can I like sell these in Georgia for you?" And she said, "Sure." And later she said no. And meanwhile, he took the idea and he copied it, and he sold it to Coleco, the Connecticut leather company, which made Cabbage Patch Kids, and also ColecoVision gaming system, which
had one.
Wild. And they licensed it, and it became this absolutely insane phenomenon where people were like Black Friday punching each other in stores to get a toy for their 3-year-old who wouldn't even know. I'm not saying your mom, pregnant, punched anyone, but I would love it if she did.
Me too.
Yeah.
And also I wouldn't have known, and I was 2.5.
Right.
Yep.
So they so 80s, absolute triumph of marketing. You didn't buy them, you adopted them. Yep. And from the Babyland General Hospital in Georgia, which was a converted doctor's office, and like it's still a place and you can go there. It's a retail like museum. Wild mythology, bunny bees populated them. They grew in habit. Okay. Yeah, like I had 3 and I don't even like dolls. And I remember their names. Their names were Miranda, she was the baby, and Kelly and Monica. And Kelly was a blonde. Monica was black because I wanted a black sister because I thought my aunt was black because she was very tan and I thought she was one of the dancers on Solid Gold.
Oh no.
So it's got to be Cabbage Patch Kids.
This has been a journey,
wow.
and I'm so happy to be on it with you. So thank you very much, Kate. All right, we are moving Cabbage Patch into the Final Four. Next, it's 1-seed Pound Puppies, which face stiff, and I do mean stiff, competition in 3-seed Masters of the Universe. Karissa, do what you can to leave that lonely pound behind and adopt Pound Puppies into round 2. Zach, summon the power of Grayskull to defeat the evil forces of, checks notes, the Pound Puppies? I'm going to have Karissa go first.
Pound Puppies, I think, might be the most unisex toy on this bracket.
Yeah.
They were plush dogs. They're flat, floppy ears, really soft. They came in a cardboard doghouse box with an adoption certificate. 80s kids were really into adopting our toys. There were a lot of things that you could name them if they didn't come with a name and you sent in the thing. Anyway, they came out in 1984. And since they spawned a lot of other tangential things like coloring books and little golden books and figurines, they also had a 1985 TV special, but they weren't a cartoon. They made a cartoon of this product, but it wasn't. It was a reach. They've since been relaunched several times. So 1984 is when they came out. In 1987, they did a promotional thing with Hardee's and Pizza Hut where you could get a smaller size with your kids' meal. And I would like to introduce you all to Brownie, my pound puppy from Hardee's, who I still have and love so, so much. He's still very soft. And there was also another line called Pound Purries. That was the cats. I had the cats, the white cat Snowball, and then the Hardee's cats, Freckles, and Caramel. Anyway, we love plush, and we still love plush. So,
Pound Puppies for you. Zach, talk to us about Masters of the Universe.
So you covered a lot of it already, but it is one of the essential 80s toy line that it only existed in the 80s. Yes, there has been a resurgence with the cartoon. Maybe they'll bring another movie or something here or there. But when you're thinking of 80s, this was definitely one of the ones that came to mind, even though it wasn't my main collection. They had the variety of different characters. They had the vehicles. They continued to go wave after wave to create new characters. Again, you were going to get a lot more out of these toys than you were the cartoon. It's there if you want to go watch it. And the new cartoon is a continuation of it. But it pales in comparison to the adventures and the creativity that you could have as a young, for me, a boy growing up in the 80s. This was what I was more interested in. I did know people that did have Pound Puppies, both male and female, and they were more of the unisex toy. I do agree with you, Karissa, 100% on that. But for 80s, the Masters of the Universe, like that's where they started and that's where they ended. They are 80s.
Great. Kate, where are you on this one? Is it Pound Puppies or Masters?
Personally, I adored Pound Puppies and Purries. Of course, I had
they are
adorable.
And
I had a little boy puppy who had like a little satin bomber jacket. It was adorable. But I do have to give it to Masters of the Universe for the 80s-ness of it all and the design.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that I'm going to give this one to Masters, but Karissa, you did an awesome job defending Pound Puppies. So we will move Masters of the Universe into the Final Four next. It's the Force versus the Light, as 4-seed Star Wars figures are squaring off against Rainbow Brite, a 2-seed. Karissa, don't let Murky Dismal win the day. Fight for Rainbow to shine into the Final Four. Zach, make sure your argument is fully operational in defense of Star Wars. I'm going to have Karissa go first.
Okay, so Kate already covered a lot of the Rainbow Brite lore. I just want to reiterate some of what the toys were. I think Rainbow, you could get them. They released the figures in a couple of different sizes. There was like an 18-inch fully plush one, but the main one was like 12 inches plush with the molded head, removable clothes. And
I could work much better with 12 inches than 18. I'm just saying.
Right. I mean, it's much more manageable. Molded head, the yarn hair that was, if you ever took out her high pony, bald in the middle. So don't do that. Don't do that.
No, Rainbow
also,
Brite.
never unbraid your Cabbage Patch Doll's hair. It's a bad move. Yeah, and the bang, Rainbow Brite and then her friends all looked similar but different colors, very much like the Strawberry Shortcake, as we talked about previously. And the villains, as you sort of referenced, Murky and Lurky, all in gray. It is such wacky lore that they're so serious about. It's just the more gay toy. I mean, you kind of have to go with it.
Yep. Rainbow Brite 100% wins on fashion, but Zach, talk to us about Star Wars.
Yes, let the debate flow through you. So Kate did an amazing job talking about the basis of Star Wars, and they did start in the late 70s, but the bulk of it came out in the 80s. Star Wars was 70s. Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Power of the Force, the droids, the Ewoks, all 1980s. Star Wars did have a 12-inch for you, Eric, if you're just wondering. Late 70s, early 80s, that was there. Also, you guys touched on it with the Micro Machines. Star Wars did also have some Micro Machine sets as well. That was late 70s into the early 80s. So with Star Wars continuing, you do get to bring an adjacent Micro Machines with it if you were partial to Micro Machines. But Star Wars, again, ignoring all the newer stuff, it all started late 70s and really took off and existed through the 80s.
Kate, where are you on this one?
I have to give it to Star Wars still, while recognizing that the design of Rainbow Brite is the gayer toy, and it is just like they're really fun. They're really like colorful. I at the iridescent fabric, I loved it. And I had a stuffed Starlight. She was so cool.
Rainbow Brite will win for me in terms of 80s points. It is like apocalyptically 80s, right? But in terms of what's the better toy line, I give it to Star Wars. And I do think the argument that it was there for the first half completely sways me. So that's 3 for Star Wars. I'm sorry, Karissa, you've done a great job.
That's okay. Honestly, I think this is probably as far as Rainbow Brite should go. But the content that it spawned and came from, those cartoons, that movie, is bananas.
So we'll be moving Star Wars into the Final Four. Finally, in round 2, the majority of the panelists are throwing down between 2 of the biggest IPs to come out of the 80s. 1-seed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and 2-seed Transformers. Zach, try to keep the turtles from getting shell-shocked. I will consume mass quantities of Energon and then argue that these robots in disguise need to continue on. Zach, please go first.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was born in Dover, New Hampshire, my home state. Oh. It started as a very dark comic book. Yeah. If you go back and you read it, it is not really meant for kids. But in the 80s, they found a way to take something like RoboCop, Aliens, Beetlejuice, Ninja Turtles, and market it for children. Yep. And was born one of the biggest collections that continues to go today, which is good and bad for my argument. I acknowledge that. The reason why I personally went with Turtles, but 100% see why everyone else went with Transformers, is, again, just my connection. It was the largest collection that I had. Had the Technodrome, the sewers, the turtle van. I had the blimp. I had the motorcycle. I dressed up as Raph for multiple Halloweens. It was for me, that was my focus point for a kid. I had some of the Transformers, but that also was such a weird approach that they preyed upon kids' emotions and killed every character so that they could bring out more toys. That is marketing. Genius and horrible all at the same time.
That's why we love it. That's America, baby. So it is a 3-1 right now. I do want to ask, Kate, has he swayed you, or are you sticking with the Transformers?
I'm sticking with the Transformers, those robots in disguise.
Carissa, are you sticking with Transformers, or have you been swayed?
I'm really tempted because I love the Ninja Turtles. I feel like I was more into them in the 90s, though. But it's a better cartoon. Like, their cartoon is great. Also, I just want to pull the panelists. Who was your turtle? Because I feel like this says a lot about who you are as a person. My turtle is Donatello.
Same.
Yeah.
Zach? Yep.
I was Raph.
I was Leonardo.
So was my brother. I didn't have Transformers, but Transformers are the 80s toy here.
So I agree. Just for everyone to be aware, TMNT started the line in 1988, but didn't become popular until 89. So that's ultimately my thing there. So that is 3 for Transformers. We will move it into the final 4. And with that, we have our final 4. We're going to take a quick break to throw out this entire batch of Cabbage Kids because they've got worms. We'll be right back after these messages.
Another email newsletter? God, I know. But listen, the Great Pop Culture Debate newsletter, it's actually useful. Give us 3 minutes of your lunch break, and we'll tell you all the coolest new stuff in pop culture that week. The biggest new movies in theaters, the hottest new albums about to drop, the TV shows everyone will be talking about. We bring it to you every ball. It's all thriller and no filler, and you'll also find out all the fun news from the podcast. Subscribe today at greatpopculturedebate.com/subscribe.
And we are back with the final 4 of our best 80s toy line debate. At this point in the show, I always like to take a step back and see if it shook out the way I was expecting it to. Absolutely not. There were big swings every single round. And so we now have a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, and a 4 seed in the final 4. That may be a record for the Great Pop Culture Debate. That being said, I do think it's actually a great final 4. I think these are 4 tentpole iconic toy lines of the 80s. We're going to get right into it. First up, it's Cabbage Patch Kids, a 1 seed, versus Masters of the Universe, a 3 seed. And I want to start with Carissa. Where are you on this one?
I'm with Cabbage Patch Kids. Also looking at this final 4, 3 of the lines are figurines, and this is the only plush. I was a plush girl. I had 2 pet nets in my room to contain all of my yes. My mom used to make my Christmas and Easter dresses. I would make a matching one for my Cabbage Patch doll out of the same fabric.
Oh my god, I love you so much, Carissa. Of course.
It was the cutest thing. And you could buy sets. I had like a pajama set. So Cabbage Patch dolls, Cabbage Patch Kids for me all the way. Also, I think plush needs to be represented here.
Excellent. Kate, are you Cabbage Patch Kids or Masters of the Universe?
I am going to go with Cabbage Patch Kids for the reason I said before. Like, part of my rubric is like, does this thing represent something about the 80s that is like watershedy? And like Cabbage Patch Kids absolutely do, in terms of the rampant consumerism, the marketing, the madness.
The punching in the face, the depravity.
The depravity. And also just like the design of the dolls. It's just, they're hilarious. It's pure kitsch. I love it.
And only in the 80s could they have been designed that way. Zach, where are you on this one?
I'm sticking with Masters of the Universe because, again, they are 80s to me. They started and died for the most part in the 80s. Cabbage Patch, I think, the bulk of it and their popularity is 100% 80s. They have continued beyond that into the 90s, even the 2000s, I think, being representative of the Olympics. I think they even have presidential candidate versions now, which is, I did not know was a thing, but is a thing. You can go get your own Barack Obama or John McCain, apparently, from a few years ago, if you want. But for me, it's still Masters of the Universe.
I am going to actually throw it to Cabbage because which ones did I have? Masters. And it was probably one of our bigger collections. I did not have a Cabbage Patch Kid. We would not have been allowed. But in terms of the phenomenon aspect of Cabbage Patch Kids, like if you're listening to this in the 80s or before your time, do you remember Beanie Babies? Do you remember the obsession with Beanie Babies?
Yes.
Cabbage Patch Kids were that, but even worse.
Yeah.
People died. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if people actually died. Maybe they did.
Just like Stonewall.
Exactly.
Oh.
But so Cabbage Patch Kids has to be here. It has to be in the top 2 for me. So that will move on to the final 2. Then it's Star Wars, a 4 seed, versus Transformers, a 2 seed. I'm going to start at the back of the pack. Zach, Star Wars versus Transformers.
This is really a toss-up for me because they both are 80s to me. God, I really don't know. I guess I would go with Star Wars. Again, that's been... I mean, Transformers, they both have continued, since then. Star Wars, to me, it was, again, marketed and built a lot of the structure that a lot of these toy lines followed. So for me, it's Star Wars.
Kate, is it Star Wars or is it Transformers?
It's Star Wars. Transformers are incredible toys. Also, like, incredible, pieces of engineering. Fantastic. But I have to give it to Star Wars.
Karissa.
This is tough for me because I'm not really familiar with either of these. My brother had Transformers. We weren't really Star Wars kids. But the way that you all are talking about it, I mean, I know it's definitely an 80s property, and the way that Kate has been talking about the toy design and how phenomenal it is, my vote's completely swayable here, but I'm swinging towards Star Wars.
Look at the craftsmanship on this Darth Vader podcast.
Oh, enough.
You can't
Your
see.
Darth Vader craftsmanship. Let me show you real craftsmanship. This is Soundwave, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, there he is.
This is a tape deck that turns into a person. And he has a tape named Frenzy that also turns into a person. And I would do that, but I don't have time. We also had the cat whose name was Ravage, and he also turned into a tape deck, but we buried him in the wall, and he's still there to this day. So let me talk to you about the Transformers. So the cool thing about the Transformers is that they were actually a Japanese import, but American kids had no idea. Talk about robots in disguise. Hasbro licensed existing toy robot lines from Japan and created an elaborate storyline around these figures, like we talked about with other things, right? All of which had to have one specific component. These figures had to change from a robot form into some other object. For the Autobots, the good guys, that usually meant turning into different types of cars or trucks, like the leader Optimus Prime, while the evil Decepticons were a bit looser, as their members transformed into fighter jets, a cassette player, like my friend Soundwave here, construction equipment, and notably a literal handgun in the form of their supreme leader Megatron. And I've said this before, what is a bigger villain of 1980s children? Guns. The Transformers toys were cool. The transforming application was mind-blowing for a kid, and many of the original line were actually made from metal, which meant they had a real heft to them. The continuity built around the line was also really impressive, peaking with the 1986 Transformers animated movie, which, as Zach alluded to, a magnum opus, not to be confused with Ultra Magnus, that set the table for Generation 2 Transformers by killing a bunch of major characters like Optimus Prime. If you don't vote for the Transformers now, Optimus Prime will have died for nothing. And if you shop on Amazon Prime Day, then you are being sacrilegious. That's my statement. So, Karissa, where are you?
Oh, man. Okay.
Where is your God now?
I think you've swayed me because Transformers is a 2 seed, right?
It is.
Yeah. And that is the toy that I was more familiar with. And your argument has definitely swayed me. So I am swinging with Transformers here.
That was really less an argument and more a rant, an unhinged rant. And I
loved every second of it.
Thank you.
It was very persuasive. You've swayed me too. I'm Transformers.
Really? Zach, you speaking with Star Wars?
No, I'm not an asshole. I'm going to go with Transformers. Come on.
Praise Prime. All right, so we have a final 2 of Cabbage Patch Kids, a 1 seed versus Transformers, a 2 seed. I'm going to start smack in the middle with Kate. Where are you going?
I just want to read... I mean, Transformers doesn't have a Wikipedia page called the Transformers Riots, does it? Because the Cabbage Patch Riots is definitely...
It's a separate entry.
It's a thing.
I'm just going to read this to you. Reports of violence included hitting, shoving, and trampling, as well as some customers attacking others with weapons, such as baseball bats, in order to obtain a Cabbage Patch doll. It was not clear why the homely dolls were so intensely desired.
Okay, I will tell you, Emily was not homely. She had 2 red braids that I mistakenly undid at one point and to discover giant bald spots underneath and then to really crappily try and put back together. But she was not homely.
Zach, where are you? On the one hand, we have the Cabbage Patch Kid riots. On the other hand, we have the fictional genocide of Transformers.
I don't know.
To the 80s children.
And you wonder why we are the way that we are.
Exactly.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm sure parents got in, maybe not riots, but in altercations over a popular toy like that. But I love the fact that there's an entry about the riots. God, I really...
1983 to 1986, they were the Christmas toy.
Yeah.
Remember the Tickle Me Elmo thing?
I do.
Yeah. This was that for 4 years in a row.
Yep.
In 1984, they sold over $2 billion.
Well, Karissa, where are you on this one then?
Me?
Yeah.
Cabbage Patch Kids.
Kate, do you have an answer?
Cabbage Patch Kids, yeah.
Zach, do you have an answer?
I guess I want Transformers, but I think Cabbage Patch Kids screams more 80s. The fact that there is a Wikipedia entry about riots for 3 years in a row, it was the toy.
Yeah.
I can't really argue with that. Even with the popularity of Transformers, I think Cabbage Patch Kids takes the 80s argument.
Yeah, 100 for me. While Transformers was by far one of the more popular toy lines of the 80s, Cabbage Patch Kids were the toy of the 80s. I just don't think you can deny it. So there you have it, folks. Our pick for the best 80s toy is the Cabbage Patch Kids. Do you agree? Do you think we need to spend more time studying with Master Splinter? Tell us how you really feel by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com or find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or Mastodon. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you can hear about what new debates are coming soon, vote in open polls, and even decide which topics we tackle next. If you really enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to like and rate it on whatever platform you listen on. I want to say thank you to my panel. I consider you all dolls. Well, Zach here, an action figure. And thank you for listening. If you loved what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get even more exclusive content and you get episodes a whole day early. We hope you have a good one. And remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion. And now you know. And knowing is half the battle.